So, in class this week, we talked about universal design and how universal design can mitigate the impact of social construction. Universal design is defined by the Disability Act of 2005 as the design and composition of an environment so that it may be accessed, understood, and used to the greatest possible extent in the most independent and natural manner possible in the widest possible range of situations without the need for adaptation, modification, assistive devices, or specialized solutions by any person of any age, size, or having any particular physical, sensory, mental health, or intellectual ability or disability, and means in relation to electronic systems, any electronics-based process by creating products, services, or systems so that they may be used by any person. A lot of words, but basically universal design is just making sure that everything is designed for everybody, not just able-bodied people. That's it in a lot simpler terms. But the way that this can mitigate the impact of social construction is that it makes everything accessible for everyone. So people with disabilities are no longer disabled because they are able to use everything in the same way that able-bodied people are. And so there are 7 principles of universal design. The first is equitable use, which is that the design is useful and marketable to people with all different abilities. The second is flexibility in use, which is that the design accommodates a wide range of individual preference or ability. The third is simple and intuitive use, which is that the design is easy to understand for everyone, regardless of their previous knowledge, experience, or mental ability. And the fourth is perceptible information, and that the design communicates the necessary information to everybody, not just able-bodied people. So, like, regardless of any different like sensory abilities, like it communicates the information to blind and hard of hearing or deaf people, and not just people who are seeing and hearing. The fifth is tolerance for error, and that the design minimizes hazards or adverse consequences for accidents or unintentional actions. The sixth is low physical effort, and that the design can be used efficiently and comfortably without any fatigue, or at least the least amount of fatigue as possible. And the seventh is size and space for approach and use, and that it's the appropriate size and space for anyone to approach, reach, manipulate, and use, regardless of their size, posture, or mobility level. And so after we learned about all of this about universal design, we are given the task to come up with a list of assistive technologies to assist people with varying levels of ability. So the different ones that we did in each group were people who used wheelchairs, people who are short, nonverbal people, people who have difficulty reading, people who are blind or visually impaired, people who are deaf or hearing impaired, and then lastly, people who have amputated limbs. And so me and Allie had coming up with 6 assistive technologies for blind people. And this made me realize it is so hard to try to come up with assistive technologies for people with disabilities that you do not personally have. Like, trying to imagine what would help a blind person as someone who can see is virtually impossible because you don't know like what they struggle with on a day-to-day basis. Not that like it's impossible, but it is definitely very difficult, and that made me realize that we should really listen to people who actually have these disabilities and what would help them, rather than trying to guess and come up with what would be helpful on our own. And not only did it help me realize that, it also made me realize like how much our entire world is like reliant on being able to see. I was like trying to picture myself and like what I do every day and how I would do that if I was visually impaired. And I was like, I could really not do hardly any of the things that I do on a day-to-day basis. So it really put things into perspective for me, and made me like fully grasp like how much our environment is completely catered to able-bodied people, like, wholeheartedly, which was definitely an enlightening experience for me. So yeah, that's pretty much all I had to say about universal design from this week.